One facet of the Division community that I totally embrace is how we have all of these individuals who actively voice their findings, opinions, and options for issues found within this game. I mean, there are so many moving parts to the Division that it really takes the community to help sort through them all. Sometimes I see a small detail that others have missed, and other times it is another community member bringing up a concept that I have missed. I mean, I cover a lot of other games. I am involved in a million other things, so when I see something interesting, a build, a concept, a discussion, I latch on to it. I take it all in, and then I develop my own ideas and opinions about the information presented. What's going on, everybody? It's LtBuzzLitebeer, and welcome back to my channel. And today we are talking the Division 2 and the upcoming changes to the competitive meta. But first, the channel has been seeing some explosive action these past few weeks. I've read comments that it is my new unscripted formats. Others are saying it is my new thumbnail artwork. Whatever it is, I appreciate your continued support for my content. In case you aren't yet a sub, please smash that big, beautiful subscribe button and make sure to ring the notifications bell to receive my latest upload alerts. And set your alerts to all. Really important on that last step, as without that change to receive all, YouTube will default to occasional alerts and you could miss my latest upload. Interesting one planned for you today, so let's talk upcoming changes to the meta. So the basic premise for today's discussion is we're going to be taking a look at these proposed skill jammer changes and how they could affect the competitive meta, the PvP meta within the Division 2, because these are pretty drastic, even though the text doesn't really identify that these are going to be as drastic as they are going to be. And I know that we've received the text and at least the wording for the PTS Phase 1, and as I am recording this, I just received an alert that Morton has kind of tweeted out that they are taking a look at this original design of the skill jammer changes, and changes will be made because there was some pretty forceful feedback being thrown back at these potential changes, which I'll discuss here in a moment. Ever since the release of the Division 2, I really haven't engaged in the competitive side of this franchise. I still go back and do so in the Division 1 when I have time, but because I don't engage in this side of the gameplay loop any longer, I tend to be out of the loop, you could say, as far as the latest issues, the balance changes, the bugs, the metas, and things like that. I have been following, of course, closely what's going on with the shrapnel trap, but this was kind of brought out of me by a video that I watched a little earlier today, and I'm going to leave a link to it down in the video description. Fellow Division content creator, his gamer tag is BeRighteous, but the channel name is Identity. And he brings up a very good point, is that in the past, if you were running around with an all-red DPS build, whether it be in Conflict or in the DZ, and you were running like a 0 skill tier or maybe a 1 skill tier jammer pulse, you could jam a skill tier player. Maybe they were running around with +6, and you could jam them, and that was your counter to their skills. Now let's be honest here, the skills in the Division 2 have always been uber powerful. That's never been a debatable fact. And I read some very interesting feedback over on Twitter today talking about the fact that skills affect players not only with status effects, but with damage. And these are just things that somebody that doesn't engage in PvP very often doesn't often consider, but thinking back to it, yes, that is absolutely how they work. So you can have somebody with a very high skill tier build and they're hitting a player for not only status effects, so they're disrupting them and etc., but they're also hitting them for damage. So it's a 2-for-1 hit. That's, you know, you tend to see that sometimes out there in the DZ, those one-shot stickies just absolutely melting 12 players all in a little group. You know what I'm saying? Skills in this game are very, very strong. So the proposed change, and this came out with the PTS Phase 1, which was on Friday, is that If you are a lower skill tier player, let's say that I go in with a red DPS build and I'm maybe a 0 skill tier. I'm just a full-on red glass cannon, but I'm running jammer pulse, and then I run into a +6 skill tier player and I hit them with a jammer. My jammer will no longer take their skills offline. I have to be equal or greater value of skill tiers in order to jam them effectively. And there has been actually a lot more public pushback to these proposed changes than I initially anticipated. I guess because, once again, I'm not actively engaged really in that side of the game. Okay, sorry about that. Probably rolled way off onto an obscure tangent of sorts. It's one of the byproducts of doing an unscripted video, the formatting, etc. So let me just pull this back onto the main topic. And what we were talking about is these very high skill tier builds, and they've always been within the game. In the past, we used to see this skill build meta. It's since transferred over to more of a DPS meta. And from what I am seeing, if these skill jammer changes are installed the way they are, I know that Morton said they're taking a look at it, but let's say that they actually make it into the game the way they are, is you're going to take away every ability to counter a skill tier build. So not only are they powerful, not only are these builds capable of producing enormous amounts of single point damage, not only from the weapons but from the skills. So you're basically getting attacked from 2 different players that are actually rolled into one. So all of that is coming against you, and now you have no ability to counter what is being thrown at you. For instance, if I went into the DZ with an all-red DPS build, maybe at 0 skill tier, if I ran a jammer, at least I stood a chance of maybe taking a skill tier player offline for a little bit before they focused all that attention, like a assault drone and a capacitor and everything on me. As I watched the video over on Identity's channel, he's demonstrating just how powerful these skill builds are, and we already knew that from the past. But if you take like these all meta pieces, like I saw Fox's Prayer knee pads, I saw Contractor's gloves, a Fenris mask, I believe it was a Seska chest piece with spotter, and then you roll all of these to a core attribute of skill tier, you're basically taking what was essentially an all-red DPS build, and now you're turning it into a skill tier build, and now you've got all this damage flowing out of your weapon because we know the capacitor is strong, and now you're doubling it up with all this skill damage and skill tier packed onto some sort of assault drone or something like that. It's a 2-for-1. And now with these skill jammer changes, you've taken away the ability of a DPS player to counter what's being thrown at them. And it's making what are already very strong skill builds, and it's making them exceedingly strong. Like, these are going to be god tier builds from now on. So naturally, this would lead us into the next part of this discussion, and it's what can they do? What can they do to kind of balance out the Division 2 meta? Now, thinking back to the Division 1, we certainly had some imbalance issues, but that PvP game within the Division 1 was all about counters. You show up with one thing, I'm going to counter it with another. Sure, that we had very strong builds, we had very strong skills, but you could counter them with something else in the Division 1. It was also, yeah, we had some outliers, but it was more of a balanced PvP game. You could go in with Predmark, you could go in with Strikers, you could go in with D3, you could go in with a skill build into the Dark Zone, and you could hold your own. It just depended on your playstyle, and it depended on what the other players or squads were bringing against you, and then you could kind of counter to them. You would start owning them. They would go into the checkpoint, they would change their builds, come out, counter what you had countered with, then they'd wreck you, and then you go, it just went back and forth, back and forth. It was a game of chess. And there was also an element of skill within that Dark Zone gameplay, and I think that's an element that's kind of missing within the Division 2. there was elements that required timing, that required knowledge of how your build was set up. For instance, Combat Medic. I use D3 quite a bit in the Division 1 Dark Zone. Combat Medic, if you pop that med kit right at the right moment, could replenish your shield. You could also help out your squad mates. Maybe their self-heals were down on cooldown. They're like, I'm about to go down. You could hit your own med kit, and as long as they, I think it was within 20 meters, it would replenish them as well. So there was that element of timing. Well, we don't have that anymore within the Division 2. It's all about who's got the best build and who's embracing the most about the meta. You can be a very below average player and still go into the Dark Zone and more than hold your own as long as your build is up to it, which really wasn't the case so much back in Div 1. You could show up with a pretty good Strikers build, and if you didn't know what you were doing, if you couldn't counter what the other player was doing, they would absolutely wreck you. So again, we're back at the topic for this discussion. What do they do? How do they handle this? Do they A, push forwards with the proposed changes to the skill jammer as it's written in PTS Phase 1? Do they revert and just say, screw it, this is way above anything we can manipulate within the game code at this time? I don't know, but they are really stuck between a rock and a hard place, because if they do push this skill jammer proposed changes like they have written here in the patch notes, that's going to further advocate the use of high skill tier builds within the Dark Zone. If they say, screw it, we're not going to do anything with it, then you're going to keep the meta basically what it is, which is this heavy glass cannon all red DPS. I know there's some other builds out there, but it really is all about you just laser beaming people with, you know, all red high damage builds. What do they do? I don't know. I don't know if they can go in there and manipulate the difference between the damage and the status effects of skills. I don't think they can. So this is a really tough discussion. And as usual with division-related PvP discussions, I'm sure it's going to be strongly debated on both sides, and that's a debate I welcome. Make sure and leave me your feedback in the comments section below. In case you haven't yet done so, please smash that sub button and ring the bell to receive my latest upload alerts. If you could also take a few seconds more to rate and or share this video, it would be greatly appreciated. Remember, you can find and follow me over on Twitch, Twitter, and of course in my community Discord server, which supports an active and engaged overall Division community for not only the OG game, but number 2, links to all of my socials can be found in the video description and pinned comments below. Until the next one, this is LtBuzzLitebeer signing off.
System of failure.